Hi everyone, welcome back to ArtSchool. I'm so sorry I haven't been about for a while. I've actually moved house and I've moved studio all in the same week. So it's been really full on. I'm almost back up and running, but I just wanted to jump on here, say hi. I know it's been a long time. So this time I thought I'd deal with a question that's been coming up an awful lot over the last couple of weeks, and that's the issue of copyright, and in particular how you can protect your work and how you can incorporate other people's work in your work, what's allowed, what's not allowed, and what is that boundary. Now you might think that copyright doesn't apply to you, and perhaps at the moment it sort of doesn't. However, it's really useful to get clued up on this topic, because if something does happen, something out of the blue, you'll be ready and you'll understand what's going on. Now what happened to me was, sadly, I had quite a bad copyright issue appeared in my life out of the blue, and what it was a fashion label in Portugal took almost all of my paintings, made a fashion collection out of them, sent it down a runway at Buenos Aires Fashion Week, did an advertising campaign, made loads of clothes in all their stores, and I knew absolutely nothing about it until a friend of mine emailed me and said, "Stuart, I love all this fashion stuff you've been doing in Portugal. How can I get my hands on some of it?" And of course I knew nothing about it. I knew nothing at all. So I'll show you some of that just to give you a little bit of perspective about what a copyright infringement might look like, and then let's go into a little bit about what copyright means to you. Okay, so on the left you have a painting by me called Fated to Pretend, and on the right you can see an item of clothing that's inspired by it. Here you can see that bit of clothing in an ad campaign in a magazine, and here's another painting I made. I mean, they've nicked so much of my work and put it on so many different bits of clothing, it's almost unbelievable. Here's a close-up of one of my paintings. Now, I made this poster for my friends The Prodigy, and there's the Prodigy t-shirt. Now this one, Welcome to Middletown, this painting turned into a load of Middletown hoodies, and this Fix Up Look Sharp from a painting I made inspired by Dizzy Rascal, and this one, about to come up now, Let It Die, turned into a lovely t-shirt. I mean, I could go on forever. They basically took every painting that I've made over the last 10 years and turned it into clothes. So that was that, and obviously it led me into working out the legalities around copyright. I mean, obviously they couldn't do this. I mean, it just seemed wrong, but it led me into understanding a bit more about copyright, looking into it. So what I'm going to do here is present to you what I've found out, and please, honestly, bear in mind, I'm not a copyright lawyer. This stuff is deep. It goes on forever and ever. There's all sorts of nuances and subtleties. This is an absolute quick overview to get you clued up and on point about what's going on. It is not the definitive answer to every copyright issue on the planet. If you've got problems, get proper advice. I've put some links below. DACS, the Design Artist Copyright Society, absolutely amazing. There's loads of information on their website, so get involved there. Creative Commons have got some really interesting articles as well, and I've put a couple of links to other things that you might find useful if you want to get into this a little bit more. First of all, what is copyright? Well, basically, copyright enables you, the artist or the creator, to benefit from the fruits of your work, of your creativity. So it extends to loads of different things. It could be a painting, it could be a piece of graphic work, illustration, photography, literature, writing, it could be a song, it could be filmmaking. So copyright touches loads of different disciplines and genres, if you like, but I'm going to try and keep this to kind of art, if you like, because I think that's what we've all got in common. So I'll be using that as the example, but this stuff applies to lots of other areas, and also what I would say is, obviously I'm in the UK, so this is quite UK specific. It's similar in different parts of the world, but you will find little discrepancies and differences, so do your homework and look into it. But this is a basic overview. What does copyright enable you to do? Well, really, it enables you to receive financial remuneration, i.e. royalties for the stuff you make, and also to control and have a say, really, in how reproductions of your work is used. That's really, really important. So what do we mean by reproductions? Well, that could be in print, like it's printed in a book or a magazine or a newspaper or a print, or it could be broadcast, so maybe your work's used within television, or if it's music, maybe on the radio. So, you know, or it could even be used within a product. It could be on a t-shirt, as it was with what happened to me. So how is that reproduction handled? You've got a say in that. And really, what your rights are, your rights under copyright, is sort of split into two areas. There are sort of quite hard rights, which stipulate, you know, the rights you have over the works that you've made. And then there are moral rights as well, which are a bit softer, but no less important. And in fact, for me as an artist, actually the moral rights are the really important bit. I mean, the commercial stuff's sort of nice because it protects you getting paid, but as you'll see, it's a little bit hard to enforce it should things go wrong. Whereas the moral rights are also really, really important because they protect the integrity of your work, which is something you should be really keen on. How do you get copyright? What do you have to do? Do you have to write that little C thing at the bottom or whatever? No, you just have to make something. So at the point you've made a thing, a material thing, an actual object, copyright starts. Now you can do the little C and put a date next to it. It doesn't hurt, it's possible, you can do it, and it might help you down the line to say that whoever ripped off your work would have known it was copywritten because it had a C on it. But actually that's not necessary at all. All you have to do is make the thing, and now copyright starts the minute you finish that thing, and it lives in the UK for 70 years after your death. So it carries on after you're here. That's important to think about, actually, because when you're not here, obviously maybe your loved ones inherit your work or take over the role of looking after what you've made and done, and it's important that you understand that the rights is different than the object. Okay, what do I mean? That's just getting confusing. How do I explain it? Yeah, so you sell a painting to somebody, they haven't got the right to go and print it in a book, put it on a t-shirt, make postcards out of it. That's separate. So although you've sold the object, you haven't sold them the rights. That's a separate thing. Now, you could do a contract to sell somebody the rights. You can sell the rights to the work. That's a separate thing. But 9 out of 10 times, you'll sell them the object and the rights stay with you. Now, what does that mean when you pass away? Obviously, your heirs, your estate, maybe you want to specify how that works. So actually, all my royalties from my intellectual property rights are going to Battersea Dogs Home, or my aunt's having half of it and my son's having the other half and the other half, whatever. So you have to think about that, because what happens when you're gone is you're not here to explain what you want. And the lawyers, if it's not there, will fight over this forever. And you've seen, you know, if you look into what happened to the Rothko estate or the legal fees around the Warhol estate, you'll see that lawyers lived off that for a long time because things weren't clear. So think about it. Interestingly, actually, just a total side note, but back in the day, big museums, so I'm not going to mention any names, they know who they are, bought an artwork from an artist, they would squeeze into the sale contract, and we also have the rights to reproduce your work where needed, within reason. And of course, in those days, within reason was like a little printed out leaflet as to where things were in the museum, and then reasonable use over the decades has changed, and now reasonable use might be an ad on a bus or a postcard in the shop or content on an app. So you have to think a bit down the line. Actually, the rights that you're giving away today could actually be a lot different in 10, 20, 30, 50 years from now. Going back to what these specific rights are, let's just talk about what copyright isn't, because there's a lot of misunderstanding around this. People think it protects ideas. It doesn't. There are ways to protect ideas, and we can't go into that now. It goes on forever. You know, patents and design rights and things like that. But we're talking about copyright today. And copyright doesn't protect an idea. You can be sat there in your house and have this amazing idea, and you think it's wholly original and no one's ever thought of this before, and this is going to be an awesome thing to make into a piece of art. And I could be sat in the garden and I could come up with a very, very similar, if not exactly the same idea. There's nothing to stop that happening. That's the nature of ideas. You can have the idea, I can have the idea. What copyright protects is the implementation of the idea, the actual material object that's made. So what about that object? You know, can that object, a copy of that be made? How is the copy of that object used? So you can go and paint St Paul's Cathedral, and instead of doing it in its real colours, do it in tones of pink, because that's your idea. And I can go down and do the same thing, but they're two different works. That's the point. So it protects your finished work, and it gives you specific rights over what can be done with that finished work. Specifically, you have a right to make copies of it, so you can reproduce it in copies. And you have a right to distribute it, so you have a right to distribute copies of that object to the public. You have a right to lend it or rent it out for money, and you have a right to communicate it. What does that mean? To broadcast it, you know, to put it on the internet or put it in a TV show. That's your right. Therefore, other people don't have that right unless you give it to them. So that's where an infringement lies. So with the fashion thing that I showed you, they hadn't asked me if they could do any of that. I mean, I have the right to use my work on a t-shirt. I have the right to use my work in an advertising campaign. They don't. And they didn't ask. And that was really naughty, and that really, really upset me. So they're like the hard farm kind of rights, commercial rights, if you like. And then you've got the moral rights, and the moral rights are different. The moral rights, the first one is this right of paternity. I don't really like the word, actually, but it's the right to be credited, if you like. So if somebody uses your work somewhere, you have a right to say, hang on a minute, that should say by Stuart Semple on that because I made it, or by you. You have a right to be credited as the originator, as the creator of that thing. You also have a right to integrity in the work. What does that mean? You have a right to say how it's used. Like, for instance, a magazine runs an image of one of your pictures, and the colours are all whacked out and it all looks wrong, or they crop it, or they chop the best bit off, or they print it across the fold of the page, and you don't like that because that's deteriorated the integrity of your work. So you have a right for that not to happen, for people to do it right and do it nicely and respect the work. You also have a right not to be falsely attributed to work. So an example of that is actually the clothing thing I showed you that happened to me. Basically, they kind of made out that that was my work, that I'd done that. And a lot of the work actually was theirs, and they'd put my name on it. Now that's absolutely wrong. I don't want to be associated with things that I didn't make. I mean, some of them are actually quite nice, if I'm honest, but it just wasn't my work, it just wasn't how I would have done it. And in terms of the moral rights, again, the rights of integrity, they cropped my work, they changed the colours, they almost remixed it without asking me, and I didn't like that. If they'd have worked with me and we'd collaborated, I'd have done it very differently. The other thing I'd just say on the moral rights is, if you're doing any commercial contracts, like people are licensing things from you, it's really important to assert those rights in those contracts. See, they only kind of come into force if you know them and you assert them. What I mean is, in the contract, make sure you say, you know, I want to have approval on how it's cropped and what the colours are like. It's really important to me that I'm credited where you use my work, etc, etc. So make sure that stuff's in there from the start, and you should be all right. Let's just go into a couple of exceptions to this. There are loads of exceptions, and this is changing all the time. The interesting one to look at is Richard Prince, because Richard Prince, he uses a lot of existing work in his work, and he keeps getting pulled into court all the time, and he's always kind of saying that he's going to fight it on grounds that it's satirical or it's making a critical comment and it's important and he's analysing it. And that is definitely an exception under the law, but we've never seen it go all the way in court. He always settles out of court and backs down at the last minute, and I really want to kind of see how that evolves. I'll put a link below to some articles about what's going on with him, because it's really, really interesting. If you're into this stuff, it's really, really interesting. But in terms of exceptions, you know, and particularly one of your questions, actually, I know one of you was doing a project, and you wanted to use song lyrics in your work, and it was only going to be in your portfolio, and you weren't really going to share it with the wider world. Well, actually, yes, that's absolutely fine. For the sake of like education and research and studying, you know, fill your boots, that's absolutely allowed. Go and learn from everything. In that case, copying's absolutely fine for research. There are other exceptions, like for the purpose of selling work, you're allowed to reproduce it. Let's say an auction house want to sell one of your works, one of your collectors puts a work in auction. The auction house have every right to put it in the catalogue, for instance, but they can't sell copies of it. I mean, it's just to promote the sale of the thing. So that's kind of allowed. There are other sort of exceptions in terms of education, satire's one, but basically, you know, if it's a small part, if it's incidental in a bigger picture, it might be all right. Which also leads us into this other misconception, which is a quantitative misconception, which is you hear people saying, oh, if you copy less than 20% of it, or if you flip it 90 degrees, or if you only use X amount. No, I mean, this isn't true. It's not the amount that you copy, it's the significance of what you copy. So let me give you an example here. The Mona Lisa. The significant thing in the Mona Lisa, if you like, is her smile. It's iconic. We all know the Mona Lisa smile. It's probably the most famous bit of the most famous painting in the world. That bit's significant. The kind of mountainous kind of bit in the background, the landscape, is much less significant. And you might, if you made a big painting of just that little bit of the landscape and you put some other elements on it, you might get away with it because you haven't really copied the significant part. But if you copied that smile, now that is really significant. So it sort of goes along those kind of lines. There's nothing wrong with building on the ideas of previous artists. That's absolutely fine, as long as you're not kind of copying the main element, so you can progress the idea. For example, Braque and Picasso invented Cubism, and shortly after there were loads of Cubist paintings. Now there's only one Guernica, and if you make a copy of Guernica, let's say a photographic print of Guernica, and you try and sell it or exhibit it or you have it or whatever, that's wrong. But if you make a Cubist style painting about the horrors of war, it's absolutely fine. So the idea is to paint something about war in a Cubist style. That's all right, that's absolutely fine. So what do you do if someone does infringe on your copyright? Actually, you know, what I found out the hard way is it's really, really difficult. In terms of what happened to me, they're all the way in Portugal. I had lawyers write them letters. It cost an absolute fortune, and in the end we just decided it wasn't really worth pursuing it because they weren't writing back, and it was a nightmare. So what we did was we basically called them out on social media and said, hey, you've copied all my work, and very quickly they took it all down and it disappeared. I mean, it doesn't get the money back of all the things that they've sold, and we don't know what other fashion labels it put off doing a collaboration with me because it's been done now. So that was a shame, but it kind of, I sort of learned that it's difficult to enforce it. I mean, in a smaller level, if someone's got a picture of your work on their website, maybe they're using it as a splash page as you come in or something, 9 out of 10 times, if you just write to them and you're quite friendly, say, hey, look, you've used my work there, I sort of would rather you didn't, I think it's infringing on my copyright, it'd be really nice if you took it down. Or if you'd like to carry on using it, maybe we could discuss some sort of fee. 9 out of 10 times, people will be quite reasonable. Yeah, so there you go. Hopefully that wasn't too boring an introduction to copyright for artists, but it's important stuff to know. As your art career expands and stuff, you're bound to sort of run into this. Okay, that's it from me. I'm going to be back a lot more now I've got everything set up and up and running, and I'd really like next time to just do a whole episode on your art. I've had a few pieces that you sent in. Please send in some more for the next one, and particularly any questions about the specific pieces you email in, and then we'll do a whole episode looking at each other's work, which is what I really kind of want this thing to be. Also, if there's anything that you want me to do an episode on, or that you're concerned about, or you want me to go and find out for you, I'm totally up for doing it. So email me, artschool@stuartsemple.com. Connect with me on Twitter @StuartSemple. You can Snapchat me, Stuart_Semple. They're the best ways. You can get me on Facebook as well. All right, it's been so good to be back with you. Here if you need me, and yeah, just have an awesome week. Good luck making your stuff. I'll see you later. Bye.